Hello everybody, this is Robert with the Multilingual Times and Polyglot News. We got our first interview here with Christophe and Joe. We're in beautiful Chiang Mai, Thailand. And so, all right, so it's down to you, Christophe.
Okay, thanks a lot. This is, as we said, one of our exciting first interviews. We're going to bring you exclusive interviews with language learners who've done some unique things in unique places, and also they have some credentials. Joe is a graduate student in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. He's taught in Korea and Africa, right? And where else?
I worked in Africa.
Yeah.
But I worked in a French environment in Africa
okay.
as a French speaker.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's where we're going with this, actually, because
okay.
Joe is a successful learner of French. I should say something here that kind of will derail a lot of people when they want to run down linguistics, because Joe was originally in the linguistics department, and that the linguistics department here, because this is a field linguistics school primarily, you have to prove that you are fluent in a language before they'll accept you, and that's FSI DLI 2+ is what they're considering that as fluent here. Anyway, so Joe language was French to get into the program, and he has done some rather strange things. He lived in Paris for what, 2 years or 3 years?
2 years.
2 years, and why don't you tell people what you were doing when you were in Paris?
Well, I was living in Paris from 1994 to 1996, and I was a street musician basically. But in Paris, the way you make money as a street musician is you play in those days anyways, you play in the metro, on the trains. So you get on a train, on the train. You get on a train with the people at a popular stop. You play for 4 stops until the next kind of stop where you expect a lot of people are going to get on and get off, and then just before they all get off, you collect. So if you time these things right, you know, there are certain places in the metro that work out just well between one station and another. Yeah. You play for 3 or 4 minutes. You have time to go around and bottle, as they call it. That means you carry your bottle around, or your sock, your hat, or whatever. Take your get your money, and then the thing pulls into the station. The doors open, and off you go, and you play the next train. And I did that for 2 years, and I made a comfortable living doing that.
Well, okay, that's probably pretty interesting to people, because not many people have done this in their life. So unlike,
yeah, I did this when I was in my 30s.
Unlike like in many countries, even in Montreal, you'll have people playing, but they play outside of the actual train.
Yeah, that's the typical way.
Yeah. Okay, so doing this to the Le Fric, did they bother you very much or not?
No, at that point, no. This was kind of a tolerated, known, practically a tradition in the Paris metro.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people. They did surveys from time to time, and I think the 1 year that I was there, they did some newspaper did a survey, and they counted over 100 people doing this in the metro on a regular basis.
So okay,
I was one of the hardcore though.
Well, okay, well, just interestingly, what were the best hours for getting money? I mean, when people in rush hour, I can't.
Well,
see
no,
that
you
being
can't.
Good,
Rush
right?
hour was physically impossible to play.
Yeah, because it's like I've been in the metro. Paris.
But the best hours, well, pretty much anytime that there was. Yeah, seriously, anytime that there was a sufficient number of people on the train.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when I got there, I thought, oh, people don't want to hear this in the morning. It didn't make any difference. Morning, evening, any time there was people on the train, you play, and if they're in a fairly good mood, they'll give you money, and if you give a good performance, they'll give you money. But there's one definite pattern that we all noticed. Summer, especially the month of August, absolutely sucked. Because
they leave. In Europe, that's a vacation month.
Well, yeah, all the Parisians left for the entire month, and they're replaced by
the
tourists. And the tourists, they love your music. Yes, great. They smile, they cheer, and then they give you fuck all. So, pardon my French.
Yeah.
I don't think that's French, Joe, but go ahead, keep going.
But anyway.
Yeah, so the tourists, so we hated August. August was, the dry season.
Did you sing in French or English?
I didn't sing. I played traditional Irish flute.
Okay.
Irish flute.
Traditional Irish flute.
But, this is where I want to go with this, though. However, so you got a lot of slang practice, though, right? You picked up because listening to the responses of the people, right, and communicating to them. I mean, obviously, you were trying to I mean, you didn't just go around sticking your hand out, right? You said something to the people.
Well, I said a few things, but no, talking about
your
my
interaction?
French learning experience in Paris, it wasn't in the metro playing because
Okay.
I was too busy playing. And basically, I would give a little speech, right? I would give a little speech, Mesdames
lead
et
into the
messieurs,
music?
je vais vous présenter un peu de musique irlandaise, blah, blah, blah. And, I spoke very briefly because, you had to, this was metro playing, right? You had to slam, bam, play the music, collect the money, and get out.
You're like MTV, like, you know what I mean? It was like the same sort
Yeah,
of...
a little presentation.
Yeah, like,
and
like the mindset, they don't have an attention span, right?
well, actually, no, they had it too much because there were hundreds of us down there, and the French, they see another musician get on, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes. There's beggars down there, and there's, stinky, unwashed bums passing through the carriages begging. So, Christ, they're not happy to see you when you get on and you set up your little music in the corner and you're going to play them some more shit. They've been hearing that all their lives. But if you're good, and I got good pretty rapidly because I was literally playing for my food and rent, you make money. So anyway, as I was saying, I didn't get my French practice doing this. I had to play.
All right,
I got good at French because I was living with a French family for the whole 2 years. Okay, when I arrived in Paris, I arrived there with the intention of being a metro musician because I'd visited Paris a few years before that for a summer, many years before that, I was like on my way to Vichy to study French for one summer when I was 21. And I passed through Paris, and I was in Paris for 3 days, and I met some street musicians, some metro musicians. I was talking to this American girl, and she had a guitar, and I was having lunch with her, and she looked at her watch and she said, "Oh, excuse me, I have to go work for about an hour." So she disappeared for about an hour. I said, "Okay, I'll wait for you." And she came back and she dumped this huge hat of change on the table. I said, "Where the fuck did you get that in an hour?" And she said, "I play in the metro. I play a couple of stupid folk songs and I make this money."
So what about your previous language learning experience before you went there? How familiar were you with French?
Okay, quick background. I'm an English Canadian, and I'm an English Canadian from an English part of Canada, which is basically almost everything outside of Quebec.
Yeah,
okay?
west of Ottawa.
West, yeah, like I'm a
West of
Westerner.
Ottawa.
I'm from Alberta, and basically out there, Canadians, English Canadians of my generation will know that when you were young, you studied a bit of French in school as a second language, and you learned nothing, okay, unless you were in immersion from the time you were 6 years old, which is what you have to do if you're serious about being in a non-French environment in Canada and learning. You go to immersion. Well, I wasn't. I was, just a joker who had a few hours of French a week until high school, and I learned absolutely nothing. I might have remembered that there was a masculine and feminine in French, okay? So when I went to Paris, but my second round of learning French was when I was 21. I spent a summer in Vichy at a language learning school. And at that point,
how many hours a day?
That was a full-time. I was like a full-time student, 5 days a week, all-day class.
6 hours.
Yes, yeah, about 6 hours a day, and I was highly, highly motivated.
Yeah.
So that summer, I learned a tremendous amount of French, and I have a few stories about that as well to tell you.
But did you hang out only with the francophones?
Yes, I did. I avoided English-speaking people.
You gotta do that.
My co-students were a lot of Arabs because French.
Oh, really? You had the Les Pieds Noirs or not? What
No,
was
no,
the
no.
accent?
Arabs from like Moroccans.
Yeah, but that's Les Pieds Noirs. They speak. Moroccans usually speak French.
These were not people with any French ancestry at
No?
all, right? Like Pieds Noirs. These were like Arabs, say, from the French-speaking, from the supposedly former French-speaking colonies. But a lot of them, of course, would arrive in France, and their French was absolutely abysmal to non-existent. So they had to study French too. So I spent all day in class with all these foreigners speaking French, and then in the evening I would, socialize a little bit with other people in French, with my teachers. Then I would go home and study like mad because I was super motivated. So that was one summer.
Reading dictionaries?
Yes, yeah. So then...
That seems to be a common thread. I just want to throw that out there with people really motivated. That's how exciting lives can be. You actually are reading a dictionary.
And grammar books.
Well, yeah, but I like grammar, but that's from a linguistics point of view. I mean, it's necessary. It's a structure, underlying structure, just like musical theory is underlying structure. You also know music theory. But in dictionary reading is really a bizarre thing.
Well,
the only seriously motivated bizarre individuals, and I've met a few of them, do that. I've done that. You do that.
I do that, yeah. I spent a couple of weeks in Vichy going to the public library.
Oh yeah.
And I found a couple of excellent works on French grammar, and I spent a couple of weeks copying grammar stuff.
Really?
You know, just as part of my kind of extra self-study. I was totally motivated.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to Paris, so that was when I was 21. Now, many years later, so that was like my first
Setup.
big chunk
It's a
of
setup for the language.
learning French. So my French, you know, I acquired 6 weeks of very hard study.
Where
you
were
can
you?
learn a lot.
What do you think? Where would you say your level was when you first?
At that point, oh,
yeah,
boy.
when you came there to be working in the metro, I mean to play music.
When I started off
Yeah, where do
in
you think you're-
94,
where do you
yeah,
think-
I was like an intermediate.
Yeah. What could you not talk about? What could you talk about? What could you not talk about? Were you talking
Well,
about
okay.
politics?
Let's say I couldn't really hold a fluid conversation that would make a French speaker comfortable, right?
Right.
Like, you know, the kind when you
Pauses.
speak with somebody who's just learning,
Yeah.
and you can
don't wanna-
communicate.
you don't wanna
You don't
talk
want to,
about it,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you don't want to. That's where I was when I arrived. I could kind of speak, but you know, I really was just kind of
Yeah.
a middle intermediate. And so I moved in with this French family. Okay, like I had to find a place to live. The original deal was that I was going to be I was going to sublet part of their house and kind of look after it for a month while they went on their holiday, because I arrived in the
Oh, in
summer.
August, okay.
Very typical French arrangement, right?
Yeah.
You know, people sublet
Yeah.
out for a month or two when they go on their holidays. So I moved in, but they were kind of in and out over the course of the holiday, and by the end of the month we were all getting along so well that the lady of the house, she said, well, you know, Joseph, we've never had a locataire, we've never had a renter, but
Yeah.
but if you want to stay in the attic, you know, stay in the old converted bedroom in the attic that
Yeah.
my daughter used to stay in. You're welcome to stay. So I stayed for 2 years.
What is that? Grenier? I'm trying to remember the word for.
Grenier.
Yeah, grenier.
In the grenier, yeah.
I
So I stayed for 2 years. Now,
haven't used that word in a long time.
when, okay, now you know I'm Canadian. Now, I'm not a French Canadian, although my mother is French Canadian.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I never learned any French in the house.
Well, you didn't have that Quebecois accent.
That's right.
To get
But
rid of.
when I studied, see, I also studied a bit of French in university because I'm a teacher, and I was an English major, French minor, secondary school teacher, okay? And my French minor, one of the courses I had was called Romance Linguistics. It was a linguistic, mainly phonetic overview of the French language.
Yeah.
And the prof was a Belgian
Uh-oh.
francophone who also had a big interest in Quebecois French. So he taught us the phonetics of continental French
Yeah.
and the phonetics of Quebecois French.
Yeah.
So I was very interested in this. This is long before I went to Paris, okay? So I was very interested in this. So I retained a lot of, you know, my phonetic knowledge about Quebecois.
Yeah.
And it kind of, although the original French that I learned in Vichy when I was 21 was, of course, continental French, I was so fascinated and amused by the sound of
Were you
Quebecois
going
French
around
that I
saying
retained it.
Idioms, like, you know.
Yeah, I would kind of, you know, do this,
Yeah.
and I would say,
Yeah.
I would speak this to my mother to
Depending-
amuse her because she's a French
depending-
Canadian, and my mother is a French Canadian my mother's like in her 80s now, okay? Now, when she was a young lass in Western Canada, she's not from
Lass.
Quebec, she was a Franco-Westerner from Saskatchewan. And when she was growing up, the cool thing to do for her and all her little French friends was not speak French, it was to learn English,
Yeah.
because English was cool. And so she grew up kind of despising her own
Oh yeah,
language.
that
syndrome,
happens
right?
with other than the Hispanohablantes, the Spanish speakers. That's pretty much what's happened in the United States with every other language group, which is
Yeah, it's a common kind of phenomenon.
and
It's not cool.
It doesn't. That is not true though in Eastern, the Maritime, or Quebec, Eastern Canada is not like that exactly. But yeah, I mean, because they were isolated, they were in an isolated pocket.
Yeah, well, linguistic
Francophone,
nationalism, it's a
Yeah.
huge, complicated topic. But so here's
Yeah.
my mother. Now, she spoke, you know,
Yeah.
Canadian French. So I would amuse her by pronouncing some of the beautiful French I'd learned in, which she called beautiful French. Oh, Joseph, you've learned such
it's
beautiful
prestige.
French
It's
in
the prestige.
in
Yeah.
France,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
from Vichy.
prestige
And then I would
language.
make her laugh by speaking
Dialect.
the way the Canadians would, right? I'd say, ah, le Canadien français, je m'appelle Joseph, je suis Canadien.
Suis, it's not just
Yeah,
suis.
And she would laugh.
Ouais, suis tonnerre.
So anyway, so I was assimilating a bit of this stuff without being aware of it. And when I went to France and I found my French family to live with in 1994, and I spoke a little bit of French, right? Well, the lady of the house, my landlady who owned the house, her name was Maryse. She was a very nice lady. She was a school teacher, actually. She taught French in high school, and she had an 18-year-old daughter and she was divorced, so there was me and the daughter and the lady of the house living there. So I would, started off speaking French to them as well as I could. And a few days after I arrived and I was speaking French, the daughter looked at me one day and she said, "Oh, Joseph, arrête avec ton accent de Québécois de merde."
Yeah.
Stop with your shitty Québécois accent.
Yeah.
She didn't like it. French people don't generally like that accent.
Hey,
So
hang on. This is interesting, but this is a part 1, and we're going to do a part 2. So come back. This is the Multilingual Times Polyglot News, and we'll be back with part 2.